My 2004 Mustang V6 Autocross project already has a stronger chassis, more powerful engine with crisper throttle response, improved weight distribution, and better braking. All those mods were done to support the most important changes to this car, the front suspension and the IRS swap. This video is all about getting a stock-style front suspension to function at its best. I mentioned a few times that I'm not using coilovers on this car. Most people think that's crazy, but if you've been watching this series of videos, you know there's a method to my madness. I'm trying to prove that a car that, on paper, shouldn't be competitive can punch above its weight. So how do you get a suspension designed in the 1970s to outhandle modern cars? Adjustability and predictability. Being able to adjust front camber means you can influence front grip. Increasing negative camber allows more of the tire to contact the road when you're turning, and in autocross, you're almost always turning. Caster camber plates let you dial in negative camber. I went with Steeda's 3-bolt caster camber plates because they're less expensive than the 4-bolt version, they install easier, and they work fine if you're not using coilovers. They're simple to adjust, and they have a strong spherical bushing that's a huge improvement over the factory rubber piece. I've used Tokico Illumina 5-way adjustable struts on my Mustangs for over 20 years. They seem to be getting harder to find, which is a shame because I think they're the best struts on the market. The adjusters are at the top, and they can be stiffened or softened using a small screwdriver. 1 is the softest setting, 5 is the firmest. This allows you to dial in understeer and oversteer. Being able to adjust your dampening gives you the ability to completely change the car's personality, and to remove the factory-installed understeer that holds these cars back on an autocross course. So I've added adjustability. Now the focus is on predictability. There are a lot of weak links in the front suspension of a new Edge Mustang. They're designed to be sporty, but they're also meant to be comfortable and forgiving. The springs, sway bar, and bushings allow for a lot of vagueness in the handling and a ton of body roll. Most people think the lowest, stiffest stang you can build will handle the best, but that's not true for autocross, and it's really not true for an IRS-swapped car. Remember I said the theory behind this car is to turn a Mustang into a Miata? Well, look at the body roll on a Miata and look at the ride height. A stock Miata sits high like a 4x4 and rolls like a boat on rough seas. But it handles like crazy. Because it rolls, then plants, then grips. A slammed, stiff Mustang gives your suspension nowhere to go. So instead of gripping, you start sliding, which means you can't get on the power, which means you're losing time. A Mustang is much heavier than a Miata, so you have to be able to control the roll in order to keep the handling predictable. What I'm looking for is a car that rolls just enough to use its weight to make grip. Steeda Sport front springs lower the car about 1 inch. They're a 650-pound rate spring, which means they reduce the load transferred to the front of the car. So in addition to less body roll, you get less pitching during braking. And they're just the right stiffness to feel smooth when you're attacking the cones. I also went with Prothane polyurethane spring isolators. Because they're thicker than the stock isolators, you end up lowering the car about 3/4 of an inch when you add the isolators to the Steeda Sport springs. The factory sway bar is 27 millimeters. Eibach makes a sway bar kit for the 99-04 Cobra that includes this 35 millimeter front sway bar. It comes with polyurethane bushings. Sway bars are probably the most personal choice on a car. I like a massive front sway bar because it reduces body roll and improves feedback from the front tires. Because I can adjust my struts to eliminate understeer, I'm not worried about this bar making the car push. Because the car is flatter through a slalom or around a corner, you're not waiting as long for the car to plant before getting on the power, and the car is much more composed during quick changes of direction. I always thought billet aluminum sway bar mounts were a gimmick, until I discovered the factory mounts on my 1992 GT and my 2000 GT were bent after just a few autocross events. Making everything around them stronger makes the factory stamped steel mounts more prone to bending. Steeda makes these aluminum mounts and they are incredibly beefy. Taking the flex out of the mount lets the sway bar do its job more effectively. It's a smart idea to swap out your stock sway bar end links to a version with polyurethane bushings. This kit is from Prothane. It's stiffer and stronger than stock. I also put in a set of Prothane polyurethane A-arm bushings. I needed an alignment anyway because of the caster camber plates, and the stock rubber bushings were pretty much toast. The poly bushings will reduce flex, making the car feel more composed and the steering more precise. I also installed new inner and outer tie rods and ball joints. This car is going to see 20 events a year. It's a good idea to do preventative maintenance on parts that might be wearing out. The Steeda caster camber plates offer great bang for the buck. They come with very thorough instructions. They make adjusting camber and caster really easy. Pay careful attention to the torque specs. You only need about 33 foot-pounds to keep the plates in place. You can install the caster camber plates in about 2 hours. The Tokico Illumina 5-way adjustable struts come with universal instructions that could be clearer. Make sure not to over-tighten the strut top nut because you can damage the adjuster. And be sure to swap over your bump stop and dust boot. Having a tiny screwdriver makes the adjustments a lot easier. You'll be amazed at the difference between settings. Swapping the struts takes about an hour and a half. The Steeda Sport springs don't come with instructions. It's a good idea to have a shop manual on hand. And make sure you use a jack to support the A-arm during removal. Springs can fly out and severely injure you. If you haven't done this kind of work before, have a professional do the install. You can expect to spend about 3 hours changing out the springs. The Eibach front sway bar is really well made and comes with a durable red powder coat finish. Eibach includes general instructions, but it's a simple install. The Steeda aluminum front sway bar mounts are a huge improvement over the stock brackets. They are precision machined so the bushings seat perfectly. They don't come with instructions, but the install is pretty straightforward. I used some painter's tape to keep the bolts from coming out of the slots in the frame rail during the installation. Just remember to use the proper grease on any bushing surface that touches metal. The bolts get torqued to about 50 foot-pounds. You'll want to install the sway bar and the mounts at the same time, and it takes about an hour and a half to do both. The Prothane end links have less flex and stronger hardware than the stock pieces. They are a very simple install. Just remember to tighten the end links down with the front tires under load. A set of drive-on stands works well for this purpose. They take about 30 minutes to install. The Prothane polyurethane A-arm bushings come with good instructions. They help eliminate flex in the A-arms, giving you better steering feel. They're a great low-cost way of tightening up the front end. Before you buy them, you have to check and see if you have standard bushings or hydro bushings. Standard bushings are vulcanized to the shells and must be drilled out. Hydro bushings are separate from the shells. If you pry on the metal lip, it will move away from the A-arm. When you get the A-arm out of the car, you can pry or drill the bushing out depending on what version you have. Just don't use a drill on the hydro bushings. Getting the A-arms out and the bushings in is a long job. It takes about 7 hours. But if you're going to replace your springs, you'll be most of the way to getting the A-arms out, so I strongly recommend upgrading your bushings at the same time. You don't want to get all that other stuff put in, then get the car aligned, and then find out your A-arm bushings are bad. Bushings can look fine on the outside and be dry and brittle on the inside. If you're doing all these suspension mods at the same time, you'll end up wrenching on the car for about 10 hours. Trust the car. That's what's written on the post-it note stuck to my dashboard. If you don't trust your car, you won't get the most out of it. Can you autocross a bone stock Mustang? Absolutely, and you should. But as you get faster, those weak links begin to erode your trust in the car, and you might even think that there's no way a stock-style suspension can be competitive, especially in a class like Cam. That begs the question. Mustangs love modifications. They get exponentially better with every element you improve. And when it came to the front suspension, adding adjustability and predictability let me take advantage of all the previous mods I made. The car has just enough body roll, and it turns the instant I give it an input. The front end grip seems endless, and the car is completely composed through the corners. It earns my trust and compels me to push it harder. And when I push it, there's no hesitation in the handling. No front end dive under braking, no tire chattering understeer. It just does what I want it to do. The more you attack courses, the more you realize you have to learn how to drive the car all over again, because it's so much more confident and capable. But beneath all of that, there's still something beautifully analog about the suspension. You still feel like you're driving an old car, but one that's eager to show you it can learn some new tricks, and one that can keep up with cars running coilovers. If you're looking to improve your car's front suspension and you don't want to swap over to coilovers, I highly recommend Steeda's adjustable caster camber plates and sport springs, Tokico's Illumina 5-way adjustable struts, Eibach's 35mm front sway bar and Steeda's Billet aluminum sway bar mounts, and Prothane's polyurethane A-arm bushings and links and spring isolators.